Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I work at Farm Ed in the Cotswolds. Before we start, has anyone here been to Farm Ed? A couple of people? Yeah, a few people? Chris over there? Nice to see you. So I'm in charge of public engagement at Farm Ed. My job is to run courses, run talks, come and speak to people like you about lovely things like insects. I'm not formally an entomologist anymore, but I still do plenty of entomologising around Farm Ed, despite my protests from my staff and friends. Oh yeah, there we go. If anyone wants to comment on anything, follow us, see what we've got going on. There is a Twitter link on this side as well. I might just fill in the blank on what's going on that side of the screen.
Where are you?
Oh yes, thank you very much for asking. We are just south of Chipping Norton. So we're between Chipping Norton and Shipton under Wychwood. So if you're in that sort of area, perhaps if you've gone to Clarkson's farm and fancy learning a little bit more, give us a look in. So I did a few of these talks in the past about Farm Ed and what's going on, and kind of realised that I spoke a bit about Farm Ed, a little bit about insects, but didn't really talk about me and why I do what I do. Because I could be anyone standing here telling you this stuff, and it could be, you could say, oh, that's really interesting, but I've got no idea whether it's accurate or even good, you know. So I thought I'd give a bit of background about, you know, why I got to where I am, why I'm interested in insects, quite frankly. So here I am. This is me. Looking at universities at this point, I think, looking at where I'm going next. I've got the carrot shoes, so I'm already thinking about agriculture, you know. I've already got my mind in the right space. So I was looking at universities because I really, really wanted to study neuroscience. I really wanted to look at how brains worked. I wanted to do either psychology or biology. I thought, brains, that's really interesting. I thought, can't get enough of that. Love it. So I went to the University of Derby to study biology, and within a few months realised, actually, I don't enjoy neuroscience at all. I'm not enjoying this. So I did what any diligent student would do in that situation, and just sort of partied and mucked around for a few months. And then fell in with a group in the local area called the Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire Entomological Society. Went to various things like doing some moth trapping, went to some sites to do some surveying to look at different insects that are available, living on that site, so we can learn what's there, how we can protect it, what they're doing, etc. And kind of realised that there was a job in that. You could actually do that for a living, because I think I'd never thought about that growing up. It was it just didn't seem like a thing that, it was too good to be true. I thought, I can't believe I get to go and muck around looking at bugs and insects and I get paid to do that. So when I went to the University of Derby, this is a very, very zoomed in poor quality picture, I apologise. This guy's called Professor Kareem Varhed. He was the head of entomology at the University of Derby whilst I was there, and he was one of the reasons I wanted to go to the University of Derby, because we went on an open day and he was doing the sort of presentation, it's the practical that was meant to draw people in who were interested. And his practical session was on this cricket here. This is cricket. Again, there's a bigger picture there, but this is a cricket, trust me. And those are its testicles, because this cricket has the largest, I think it's mass, the biggest mass to body ratio of any testicles of any animal in the animal kingdom. And I remember something in my brain must have gone, do you know what? I think I found my calling. I think this is where I should be going, down this sort of route. So I looked into doing a master's degree, went to Harper Adams University over in Shropshire. They do lots of agricultural courses, agricultural farming, animal husbandry, that sort of thing. The entomology course is very much sort of shoved off over in the corner, bit of a disgrace to everyone else. They're sort of looking after the cows and we're going through the cow muck, that sort of thing, you know. So we studied there for a year, had a great time, learnt a lot. And then I got a job at Rothamsted. There I am. Rothamsted Research is the world's oldest agricultural research centre. It's down just north of London, just south of Luton. They do lots of stuff about crop protection, soil science, just everything. Lots of different stuff to do with agriculture. I worked with the insect pest management team there, looking at oilseeds and how we can provide things for pest management in oilseed systems, and also with the insect survey monitoring for insect migration. I'll come on to that a little bit later. And annoyingly, I am here, I'm stood here. So if you can just imagine. There we go. That's my job now at Farm Ed. I take people around the farm to talk about what we're doing at this farm. So, what are we doing at this farm? So, welcome to Farm Ed. Let's imagine we're in the rolling hills of the Cotswolds. We can see there's a red kite flying overhead. It's lovely, it's sunny. it's sunny, it's warm, it's not cold, it's not the middle of January, it's not the middle of January, middle of February rather. So this is what it looks like. This is an aerial view. There is an orchard over here, just out of view just there. In 2013, the farm, which is Honeydale Farm, again just south of Chipping Norton, came up for sale on the market. It's 107 acres specifically, and what's it doing? Oh, that's fine. It came up for sale because Jim and Wendy, who owned the farm, had decided that they hadn't had any kids, and they decided they wanted to retire, so they sold the farm. So Ian Wilkinson and Celine, his wife, who both worked for Cotswold Seeds at the time, had come into a bit of money, and they thought, you know what, we've done a lot of working within the system, selling seeds, selling fertilisers and pesticides and stuff. We want to do a little bit of how we can give back, how we can do things in farming in a regenerative way. Has everyone heard that term, regenerative agriculture? Yeah. It's about doing things in a way that's less extractive. We're not taking so much out of the soil, we're not putting so many fertilisers on. It's about finding ways that nature can provide for us. We can provide things for the ground, they can then provide for our food, thus meaning we've got a bit more of a healthy system, not taking quite so much out of the soil. So they said, what can we do for this? We've bought this farm, we've got some ideas what we want to do. The first thing they thought we could do a huge arable farm. They could have a huge field, 107 acres of wheat or cereal, and they could just run it like that. Try and do it in as regeneratively way as possible, maybe undersow it with clover or something that's fixing nitrogen from the atmosphere, putting that in the soil. They thought we could do that. They thought we could do livestock. Livestock are very important in regen. We were just talking about livestock just before, about how they're very useful for eating a little bit of the plant, trampling some of the plant and leaving some of the plant. So very good at trampling some stuff back into the soil, getting nutrients back into the soil, doing their droppings as well. If you've got a good healthy population of earthworms and dung beetles, they're getting the nutrients back into the soil, so they're really important, but not necessary. Fruit and veg, they thought you could get rid of your arable crops. We could go fruit and veg. You could look at things like just growing various other things. You could do loads of different things on 107 acres. So that could be a great idea. They thought about that. They thought we could go full agroforestry and start a little woodland. Let it all go to the wild and see what comes out of it at the end of that. They thought we could go full rewild. Has anyone been to the Knepp estate? Because they've gone completely rewild in there. They've let it all. Yeah. They've got books. There's a film about it that came out, I think last year or the year before. Very good. Anyway, they've let it all go to rewild. It's just to let it do its own thing, take it back to nature. And what Ian and Celine decided was they wanted to do all of it, basically. So they went for a very mixed farming approach. They have a little bit of everything. So there's a bit of wheat up here. That's conventional wheat. We use all the sprays and everything. It's the only part of the farm that we use any sort of sprays. Everything else is done regeneratively, alternatively. Got some experimental things, going some vegetables down here, wildflowers, animals there, natural flood management to try and prevent flooding and to keep maintain water retention on our farm, and our orchard over here, which is a heritage orchard with 150 different varieties of heritage English apples. You should come and check us out. Come and check us out, especially in October when we can actually eat the apples. That's always good fun. So, looks a bit more like this now, quite nice and healthy. And what interested me a lot when I first came to Farm Ed was that there's lots of studies that are on farms and what's going on insect-wise on farms at the moment, the good, the bad, how things are working for them, how things aren't, and what we can do on farms. But there aren't an awful lot of cases that I've found where a farm has been diversified to the extent that Farm Ed has been over about 10 to 12 years and has had lots of different things added to it, so we can see what's happened to the insects as we've provided a bit more for them. So it's a different sort of farming system, but how has that affected the insect populations? I would also be, I wouldn't be fulfilling my contract if I didn't do a quick little promo here as well. These are some of the things we've got on our website. We do also have leaflets on the table over there. Please do take one away. Have a look at what we've got going on. Come and check us out. We do run a farm walk every Friday. We have a wander around the site. The price of the ticket does include your lunch as well, so it's nice to have a good seasonal lunch in our cafe. But see what we've got going on. Okay, I've done my promo now. I can carry on to the actual stuff. So, first of all, I want to sort of meet the teams, what we're looking at here. So I want to talk about butterflies and bumblebees. I'm not sure if anyone here would be as aware of the big stories at the end of last year with butterflies and bumblebees. Last year was a bad year for them. That's the long and the short of it, really. So let's have a look at what they're all about. So butterflies and moths. I'm lumping in moths and butterflies here because there's only a few species of butterfly in the UK. I think we've got 59 species of butterfly. and there's 2,500 species of moth. And they are sort of, they do vary, and they're a bit sort of different. They are largely, ecologically, they do sort of similar jobs. The name Lepidoptera, that's their Latin name, it means scaled wing. Which, you know, you sort of touch and they get a bit little powdery sort of wings. That's what that means. They're not the most efficient pollinators compared to some of the other insects that do pollinating. We'll talk about the bumblebees and things in a minute. But they do visit a lot more plants. Because they're not tied to a nest, having to return to this nest, they can travel quite far, they can collect from lots of different places along the way. So, pros and cons, they do their bits. So there are 33 species of butterfly under threat, near threatened or regionally extinct already in the UK. So out of 59 species, that's not great. And I think I've got some more information on moths later because that's a lot more complicated what's going on with the moths. So we've got bees on this side. I apologise, it's going to cut off some of the text, so I'll let you know what it says. So in Latin, the bees and wasps are Hymenoptera, so that covers your bees, wasps, ants, sawflies. And Hymenoptera is the most useless term in all of entomology because it literally means membrane wing. And if you want to describe something having a membrane wing, that includes pretty much all insects because they all have a membrane wing. So that narrows it down to about, well, I don't know, 200,000, something like that. Anyway, fantastic insects though. We've got 25 species of bumblebee, 240 plus species of solitary bee, which are ones that don't live within a nest, in a social nest like other things like that, and one species of honeybee, which is not native, the honeybee that we use. They're very efficient pollinators, so bees are known to be very, very efficient, especially bumblebees. And you can imagine, if you've seen a bumblebee, they're big and round and fuzzy, they've got nice big pollen baskets on their leg. You can see how they could be a very, very good pollinator. They visit fewer plants than our butterflies because they've got their sort of back and forth system. They're going out, they're collecting to bring the provisions back to a hive rather than just wandering around, dancing around, eating whatever they'd like. But they're very efficient pollinators, so again, trade-offs. There are 3 species potentially already extinct in the UK, and half of all UK species are already scarce or limited in their range. So it's already a pretty dire picture before we've even got much deeper than that. But they are very much perfect pollinators, both of them, all of these groups. So pollination contributes an estimated £690 million to the UK economy each year. That's no small feat. Considering we don't pay these guys to do it, they do it all for free. Freelance, brilliant. Insects pollinate roughly 80% of all the plant species in Europe. So that's your fruits, vegetables, crops, especially things like, I know we're talking about butterflies and bumblebees here, but flies. Flies are a group I'm really interested in because they do a little bit of everything, and flies are very, very good pollinators, especially of a lot of our vegetables, things like onions. You wouldn't have onions without your flies, so if you hate onions and you don't like flies, then I'm not appealing to the right part of this here, but you get the idea. Very cool. These are very important pollinators of your broccolis, carrots, fennel, parsnip, turnip, kale, apples, raspberries and tomatoes. So they're if you think about the fact that if we just remove bumblebees from the equation, aside from the bigger picture, that's some tasty food that's just gone straight away.
Like if they like native English bluebells as well.
They do, yeah, very good. Wildflowers in particular.
I've got loads in my front garden, and every year it is covered in bumblebees.
Yeah, bumblebees and especially solitary bees, really very good for your wildflower pollination. Fantastic animals. Yeah. Butterflies and especially moths as well are pollinators of wildflowers, so they can travel long distances with their pollen. Like we said before, they're a bit more polleny. I don't know if they have a few species that are very relevant to sort of crop production. A little bit, but mostly the caterpillars are a pest. So there is that. But they're very, very good wildflowers, and they do help. They are good pollinators. Bees. So here's some of our solitary bees. These ones have here, just ahead, that one. So these are some of our solitary bees. So we're all a bit familiar with the bumblebee, but I want to talk just a little bit about solitary bees because they're so underrepresented. They don't get their dues, I think. So we've got here, it's an ashy mining bee, Andrena cineraria, if anyone's making note of all the Latin that I'm using tonight, there you go. And it's an ashy mining bee because it's, as you can see there, it's sort of an ashy sort of colour. They will find a hole, they'll dig a hole in the ground, so if you find a bare bit of soil, they'll dig straight down, make their nest under there. Really, really cool. There's a nomad bee here who's just poking his head around there. They are kleptoparasites, much like a cuckoo. So they lay their eggs inside other bees' hives. So they're looking for the nests of this fella, so they can lay their eggs in there and they can raise their babies for them. But they are a good guy, we like them, they're cool. He's even pollinating in that picture, so that's good. Hairy-footed flower bee, Anthophora plumipes. These are fun little fellas. We'll see these in probably in the next month or so. They're very early spring varieties. They have these long, sort of spindly little legs that are quite sort of funny looking. The females are a jet black colour, and the males are these sort of brownish ones with these long, funny legs. And we've got our Osmia bicornis here, which is the red mason bee, which is the ones that often find holes in walls or holes in trees to lay their eggs, make a little parcel for their eggs, pop them in the wall, leave them there to do their thing. But they're all very good pollinators, very important, and I wanted to just sort of show with this that it's not just bumblebee and honeybee. There's a lot more going on out there in the UK. But this one is our champion tonight. I wanted to talk about the humble bumblebee. Because this guy, I mean, you can imagine, or girl I should say, the majority of all the workers in the bumblebees are female, as is true of a lot of the ants, wasps, things like that. The males just sort of pop out at the end of the season. They don't do anything, they just eat, reproduce, and then die. Am I right, ladies?
Yeah.
So this is a female, she's heading into pollinating. And you can see already, even though she's only just landed, presumably she's got a nice bit of pollen stuck to her over there. She's got a nice big pollen baskets on her back leg, and loads of surface area for her to really get loads of pollen stuck to her. But this is what's really interesting about them. Okay, the gift's showing up quite nicely here. So they do this thing called buzz pollinating, which is where they can kind of vibrate their flight muscles in a way that just causes a lot of the pollen to get knocked loose. It's quite alright. Let's have a coffee break. Yes, so they vibrate in such a way that it causes a lot of pollen to get knocked loose from the plant, so a lot extra bit finds its way onto the bee. There's also, I'm not sure about the science of this, so I apologise, but there's an electrical charge to it. One of them is negatively charged, one of them is positively charged, the plant and the bee, and as it approaches, you can see slow motion videos of pollen leaping from the plant onto the bee because of the difference in that charge. So these guys, they're absolutely phenomenal for this. Their evolution has put them in such a place where they've got everything they need to be the best pollinator they can be. Just fantastic. I would very much recommend looking up more about buzz pollination because it's really, really interesting. And it's only bumblebees that can do that. Other bees can't do it, moths and butterflies can't do that. Just a little bit about butterflies and moths. This one's got a split screen, so we're only going to get one wing there, I'm afraid. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about this. Does anyone do much with butterflies and moths? Do any trapping, anything like that? No, good. Okay, I can go in depth then. You're going to wish you hadn't said that. You should have just said yes. Yeah. Butterfly on the left there. They've got quite a long, slender body. They're a bit sort of thinner. They've got these sort of clubbed antennae with a sort of ball on the end. They often rest with their wings straight back, which is a bit annoying when it comes to identifying them because they're like that, and the most colourful side of their wing you can't see so much. Often sort of mostly day active. Again, there's, what did I say, 59 species, something like that in the UK. Moths, so this is a silver white here, or it's half silver white, because it's got a little wire on its wing there. And they tend to be sort of, sometimes they're quite drab or dull. I do have some pictures of some nice ones. Again, that's, elephant hawk. If anyone's seen an elephant hawk moth, just Google that. Nice and pink and green, lovely sort of thing. Big furry bodies. They've got this filamentous antennae that are sort of long and thin without a club on the end. They're not necessarily night flying. So a lot of people assume that that's the difference. Butterflies, day flying, moths, night flying. It's not quite as simple as that. There are plenty of species of moth that are active during the day. The cinnabar moth, there's just its head poking around there. As everyone heard of this, lives on ragwort, things like that. Very, very cool. Often day active as well. And there is a magpie one there. You don't see part of it, but you get the idea of what its wings are going to look like. Really, really cool. And there's this one, the full impact of this is going to be lost, I'm afraid, but it's called a buff-tip moth. And I think this has got nothing to do with what I was talking about before. I just found this one really interesting. I wanted to put a picture of it in. It's called a buff-tip moth, and when it rests with its wings back, it looks just like a bit of a stick. So it's perfectly camouflaged with its environment. There's another picture there, but just a smiley little face. But do look at us again. Buff-tip moth, very, very cool animals. Really, really cool. What have we got next? Yes, so like I was saying before, 2024 was not the best year for our bumblebees and our butterflies. Towards the end of the year, you might have seen some of these things like this from the Bumblebee Conservation Trust. The UK bumblebees are in crisis. Butterfly Conservation, they put out things saying there's a butterfly emergency. They said here, 80% of butterflies have declined in recent years, and it's sort of the lowest numbers they've had, some of their counts throughout the year. And then even Parliament putting out things saying insect decline and food security is a big problem. 60% of our flying insects have declined. Sorry, a decline of 60% of our flying insects has happened in the past 20 years. I think that's since the 2000s, and that's a shocking number. I mean, I sort of like to ask this question, which is, think of the last time you were driving and your windscreen got covered in insects. It's probably been a little while, and it's just because so much has changed in the past few years. The insects have declined so massively because of changes in habitats, how we've used our land differently, farming intensification, pesticides, especially with moths, things like light pollution. We could go on. I'll talk about some more of these things, but food for thought. So why does it matter? I'm sort of hoping I don't have to explain to you why it matters. I'm hoping everyone here has got a bit of a clue about that anyway, but just got some figures anyway. Without bees, it would cost UK farmers an estimated £1.8 billion to pollinate crops. And again, considering the bumblebees, the butterflies, the insects are doing this for free, that's a huge number to then to replace them with. Extra click there. Yeah, huge declines. Like I say, 60% of full flying insects have declined since 2000. Yeah, across the EU, crop yields attributed to insects valued at 12.6 billion. Again, these are not small numbers. That's a lot. That's a big deal. So people are very interested in protecting these things because it would cost a lot to replace them, essentially, to do it ourselves. And some parts of the world do. We'll talk about that later. 80% of our wildflowers rely on insect pollination. That's across Europe. So again, if you think about the fact that our wildflowers aren't necessarily providing us food, they're not providing us nourishment, but from a mental health point of view, humans, we like wildflowers. We like to be around wildflowers. They're good for us, and it's good for the environment, good for food for various things, like a lot of our different types of insects, good habitats, good for diversity. A lot of them are very good for the soil, good for fixing various carbon and nitrogen things out of the atmosphere, so very good for the soil. And these guys, they do it all. 80%. I've also got, I had some other points that were from a previous slide, just to hammer home my point that I said earlier, but we get the gist. I think we're all sort of suitably scared. So, what's going on? In the words of Marvin Gaye, what is going on? The great Marvin Gaye. So, it's just cut off there, but does anyone do the big butterfly count during the summer with butterfly conservation? Yeah, a couple of people? Yeah, and then did you just sign up online, get some idea of what to do, and then do you do a transect? Do you do a walk and just count what's there? Or do you just keep an eye?
You stay in the same place, of course, for an hour and count how many you see, and then you can report it online.
There you go.
And if you say you're in a garden or a parkland or a field or whatever, and you can give your address, and then they sort of track a national map, so it's like a comprehensive.
Absolutely, and it's a great way of it's a great method of citizen science for some people to get involved and collect data, because if there was one or two people going around the whole country collecting all this data, that's an awful lot of work. So if people are interested and happy to help out, thank you, then that's great. It's a great chance for people to provide something, provide a bit of data that's really useful. But this last year, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's been running for 14 years. 2010, I think, was the first one. I think I put some of those together just before Christmas, so some of them might be ever so slightly out of date now. But it's been running for about 14 years, and 2024 was the lowest count in all that time. I don't have the specific numbers, but again, if you go on Butterfly Conservation Trust, they've got some of the more specifics. Essentially, it was a bad year last year. It was the worst summer in history for several species, which includes our common blue, green-veined white, small tortoiseshell, painted lady, some quite iconic, well-known common species that have been quite seriously affected, quite seriously declined. And the majority of species so declines in the number seen this year compared to 2023. So that's just 1 year there's been a decline. If you look at it on a bigger scale, I'm sure it would be staggering, the number, how low they've gone. But just 1 year is quite a noticeable decline. That's not great. Moths again. It's worth noting with moths that it can be a little bit more complicated because there's a bit more to them. I should put that down. Yeah, more complicated than butterflies. They have a bit more diversity, different ecologies. They do a few different things. There's a lot more of them. Some of them are quite scarce. Some of them live in certain spaces or are very specific to certain crops or certain plants that they pollinate and feed from. It's a bit harder to get an idea of. But some of my ex-colleagues from Rothamsted, they did this report. I think it came out in 2018 or 2019. And said the abundance of larger moths, that's a few different families that comprise the larger moths, had a decrease of 33% between 1968 and 2017. And that's quite a long time, but a third of all species, or a decline of a third, that's still quite a significant amount, I'd say. And of course that does sort of coincide a bit with the Green Revolution. In the 50s, that's when a lot of our pesticides, fertilisers and things started to be churned out and used on farms around the country. So, you know, there's a bit of that in that, I'm sure. But there's also, habitat destruction, chemical pesticides. So habitat's been changed to farming land, to various different things, more urban locations rather than wildflowers, woodlands, wherever's going on with these habitats. And climate change has caused decline in some species where they're particularly geographically limited, or they've only got certain food species that live in a certain area of plants. But in some of the species, it's been really useful for them. They've expand their range. It's give and take, but generally speaking, it's not great. Well, actually, I'll go back a second, because there was a friend of mine who he did his PhD on moths and looking at what was causing declines in moths, and he did sampling in various different places. He looked at wildflowers on farms, woodlands, all these different habitat types that moths are common in, and he was looking at whether these different locations and different sort of locations that were nearby affected the numbers and what that looked like for the moths, and found that there were declines in some spaces and in others, but some species were better in some places and worse in others. He essentially, at the end of 3 or 4 years of doing this study, he said, I have absolutely no idea what's going on, because it's so much happening. There's so many moving parts. Some things are really doing really, really well with all the changes, climate change and things that are going on, and some ones are really, really struggling. And it's hard to get a view overall of what's happening, because there's so many different aspects to it. It's complicated. Science is complicated. That's why I talk to people now. So the red-tailed bumblebee, again, nice picture of it there. But I'm assuming you've all seen a red-tailed bumblebee. They're a black bumblebee, quite furry, and no prizes for guessing what colour its tail is. So these are one of our most common species of bumblebee. They're in the sort of big 7. If you don't get any bumblebee guide, these guys will be on there. They're one of the big ones. So they're the most common, most easily identifiable. And according to Bumblebee Conservation Trust, their numbers are down 72% from last year, according to the count. And that's a staggering number. And this is one of our most common species as well. So I think about it like that. This is a common species. It's well established across the country. It's a generalist feeder, so it feeds from lots of different wildflowers and plants. So if that is dropped 72% in its populations, what's going on with the ones that are more, isolated, geographically isolated, or have more specific food plants? What's going on with them? I think that's really concerning, that one of the big, healthy, safe ones is showing such a problem. One of the big 7 bumblebees, common species. Oh yeah, I'm so good. I'm ahead of my own presentation. But it's not just the bumblebees. So we spoke before about our solitary bees. So over on the right here, there is a picture of the bum of a red mason bee, and that was a chocolate mining bee, which unfortunately doesn't mine chocolate, but we can hope. Andrina scotica. So these guys have had huge again, impacts and declines in recent years. Some of that can be put down to habitat fragmentation. They used to be able to travel between different spots, and now with huge cities, farms being big scale, a lot of are you familiar with the term monoculture? If I say monoculture farming, you can probably imagine what that means. It's a big amount of one thing. So if you've got to think of huge wheat fields, it's just one thing. That's not great for genetic diversity of that field, but it's also quite confusing for biodiversity, because a lot of your animals and your insects and things that are flying around are sort of flying into that field thinking they're going across a lovely lush meadow of all sorts of wildflowers, and then they sort of think, this is just one thing here, this is quite weird. So it can confuse them, it can throw them off, and they can't travel between different spots quite as easily as they could, especially with a lot of insects if we've not got rid of our hedgerows. If the hedgerows are gone, that's another little tunnel they can use to get around in between all these different spots. So habitat fragmentation, them being further apart from each other, further apart from their food sources, where they can nest, so on and so forth. Pesticides again, chemical pesticides used on food. A lot of the ones we use to target our aphids, caterpillars, whatever they are, eating our crop, they're broad spectrum pesticide, which means it's not specific to just that one thing. So you spray that on there, and that's going to kill all the insects that are in that crop. And I'm not demonising this, I understand that food production is important, and farmers have to do what they can to make ends meet, to look after themselves, to look after their families, and ultimately to provide the food for supermarkets and for the general public. So I'm not demonising it, I'm just saying, as a system, that's concerning. And it's also known to get into waterways, get into the food system. It's, not great. And they're definitely a reason for concern with these things. Land change, again, that's what comes back to the habitat fragmentation. The fact that over the past 70 years or so much of the UK has changed. I've got a map in a minute that I've just realised is going to be on this side of the screen, so I'll have to interpret that, but that's fine. The past 70 years has gone from lots and lots of, yes?
Just wondering, have there any studies been done on solar farms and land fragmentation?
See, that's really interesting, because I know a few people who are working on solar farms where they're growing, they've got the crop underneath, haven't they, and then the solar panels above it, in a way that means it doesn't stop them from getting nutrients, stop them from getting sun. So it can still function, and it's a useful, good question. I don't have the answer for you, I'm afraid. There's definitely research going on, but that's quite a novel thing, quite a new idea, I think, so, yeah. Yes, but I don't have it here, I'm afraid. Yeah, there's all sorts of. I think it's just maximising land use, because I suppose if you've got your crop growing and you can also have another thing happening on that same spot of land, you're diversifying. You've got your energy sources coming from different places. It's all out there. Anyway, it's worth a read. Do look it up, and if you get an answer, let me know. Soil cultivation. Yes. So at the end of your cycle as a farmer, if you've done your rotation, you move your crops around throughout the years. You want to get rid of your crop, and if you don't want to spray and use your herbicides to terminate that crop, otherwise it will just keep coming back, and next year when you then will struggle to grow something else there, you might have to cultivate or till, which is to turn over the land at the end of the year. This is a problem for these, especially for our ground-dwelling ones that live in the holes in the ground, as I'm sure you can imagine, because they find a nice little spot, they get themselves all nice and comfy, and then we come along and turn over the soil, and they're trapped under the soil, and they can't get back out to then, the eggs can't hatch and pop out, and new bees come out, so it just creates problems. And again, I'm not demonising that. I understand that's the system that needs to happen. And the alternative, again, is your chemical sprays to kill all the plants. And essentially the answer to that is we don't have a perfect answer yet. We've not figured out the best way to do it. There are minimum till solutions where you would turn over the soil as little as possible or as infrequently as possible. And that seems promising, but it's a work in progress.
Why can't they do what I've seen on a lot of I've seen on gardening programs, where they do no dig, and they get like manure from animals, and they put that on top of the ground. Why can't farmers do that?
It's a good question, and I wasn't ready for it. I'll get back to you on it. I'll get back to you in a minute.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I'm not sure, Chris. You're smiling to yourself. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I was just thinking, like a 6-inch layer of composted manure on an allotment scale is great.
Yeah.
But on an agricultural scale, that's an awful lot done.
That's true, yeah. That's a good point.
An awful lot of livestock. So
Yeah.
that would probably be a limiting factor.
Yeah.
And haven't we got a lot of livestock in this country as well?
We do in this country. I think it varies from area to area, parts of the country.
Not enough to cover all the arable land in 6 inches of compost.
Yeah, it would need to have a good thorough covering, I think, to really be effective. And I think, like Chris says, if you've got a couple of acres that you've got growing on in your garden, your kitchen garden, whatever you're doing, great, it would work really well. But if you imagine you've suddenly got 3,000 acres worth of field, that's a lot of areas. It's not a bad idea. I'm sure there's something in it. It's just, I suppose you're right. It's a matter of scale. I suppose is what it is.
Yeah, a lot of farmers getting much more interested in compost and regenerating the sort of soil like that rather than continuous power and turning over. Yeah.
But you wouldn't want manure to any great depth because you have far too fertile soil, wouldn't you?
There is that as well. Yeah, again, with any of these things, there's always a trade-off. There's multiple things to think
And
about.
then it rains hard and it all runs off into the river.
Yeah, and then you've got
And
again.
then people complain about
Nutrients
that.
getting in the wrong places again. It's a very complex system. There's so many moving parts. Yeah, they're all worthwhile ideas though, and like you say, on a small scale, it works perfectly. So the theory is maybe there's something in it. Maybe one day.
Okay.
Just import pollinators. And I think the thing with a lot of these things, especially with the moths and our solitary bees, because they're not as obvious, they're not as well known, they're a lot smaller, they're a lot more discreet, they're hard to keep track of, so they're often quite unrecorded, so groups aren't known about. We don't have the data to say what's really going on with these species. We don't know if they're declining in any significant amount. We know about the red-tailed bumblebee, because we see them so often, everyone's very familiar with them, we can record them nice and easily, so we can see a huge drop. But for a lot of these things that we don't know so much about, it's harder to say what's really going on without the data. Like I said, soil tillage can cause nest destruction. So this one might be a little bit contentious. Are honeybees helping? So I should say we have a honeybee course coming up at Farm Ed, so I'm going to shoot myself in the foot right now. Bees, obviously, honeybees are very important, and I've got the figure here. The global honey market is valued at $8.94 billion worldwide, which is, again, no small amount. So very important, and everyone likes honey. But honeybees are livestock. We've imported them from another country. They've been selectively bred to be vigorous pollinators, to collect as much nectar and pollen as possible. They're not native, and they do often outcompete our native species of bumblebees because they will just visit more plants much quicker, collect more pollen that they don't necessarily use for pollination. Not quite as efficient as our bumblebees at transporting that pollen. But I've got a thing here. It says each managed colony consumes between 2.6 and 4.5% of the resource within a 1 kilometre radius of the hive. So that's not too bad. 2.6 to 4.5. That's not huge. That's not going to cause too many problems. But it's when you get to this next part that says 22 colonies per kilometre squared in an intensive landscape would consume 99% of the floral resources, leaving nothing for other pollinators. So if you think about that, if you've got these huge farms where they're mass producing honey, they've got hundreds and hundreds of apiaries, they're going to be outcompeting everything in that area, and that's where we've got a bit of a problem. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't eat honey, I'm not saying we shouldn't support the farmers who have all these apiaries, I'm just saying it's something to think about. In these huge systems like this, we've brought in something that is now outcompeting our native bees because we want honey, essentially. And they do a bit of pollinating, so it's another case of I don't want to tell them they're not doing a good job. Sorry, a good job. I was getting choked up with that. They're doing a great job. They're doing a great job. But do we want to do that at the cost of our native bees, I suppose, is the question. Weather was a big one last year was appalling weather-wise. I'm sure everyone in this room, you don't even need to see the data, I'm sure everyone can say that it was a very strange one last year. In January, we had the highest reported temperatures on record in January. Again, this sort of bit here, the observed temperature was a lot higher than it had been in previous years. And of course that's an issue. If winters are too warm, things like our butterflies and our bumblebees are going to start emerging too early because they'll think, oh lovely, spring's here, I'll go and get started. And especially in the case of bumblebees, they come out, they start getting their nests ready and start laying their eggs and things. And if they've got no food resources, if the plants aren't there, they can't eat anything. That's potentially a whole hive that's then dead before the season's even started. So it can really throw off the balance with some of these things. What's that? That one says, what happened to summer 2024? I mean, it's a good question. It was a very, very mild summer. It didn't get very warm. There was lots and lots of rain, especially around our way. We had, at one point in September, I think it was like a month's worth of rain in just one day in September. We had flooding in loads of the fields nearby. It was really, really bad. And so you imagine all the things going on with the environment and the climate, the weather, really throwing off the balance, meaning a lot of these insects aren't as productive as they could be because they can't get out, or temperature's just not right for them to be active at certain times of the year, or they're coming out too early because it's too warm at certain times. Really throws things off. Yeah, coolest summer since 2015. And there's what I was just saying before. Bumblebees spotted building nests in winter due to climate change. And it's again because they see it's nice and warm, I'll pop out, spring must be here, and then nothing to feed on because the plants aren't ready.
We haven't seen that this year. I haven't seen a single bumblebee yet, and last year there were loads in my garden.
Well, that's hopefully,
Which may be because it's been so cold, maybe they haven't emerged yet, and it will be a good year.
It's true, and it remains to be seen what's going to happen this year. I'm quite hopeful, and the good thing about a lot of these things is that if we have a good year, things can recover. It's not the case that one bad year means everything's going to go down the pan immediately. It's just that bad years following bad years following bad years is only going to make things much more worse. But
not all is lost.
Not all is lost, exactly. I've got some more hopeful things coming up later on, so please just bear with me through the depression. We'll get through it. It's all right. So this is where I have my two maps. As you can see, the two maps. Essentially, what you want to see here. I don't know if I can just show that really quickly. It's not going to be very much. Essentially, there's a lot more urbanised land, a lot more farmland in 2007 than there is in the 1930s, which is this one here. It's just to show that how much everything's changed over the past 70 years or so. So yeah, land use has changed enormously over the past 70 years. 97% loss of our flower-rich meadows. So again, these are the food sources for a lot of our bees, butterflies, and that's due to urbanisation, agricultural intensification, you name it. We've gotten rid of a lot of these things. And again, we didn't necessarily design it that way. We didn't think, oh, brilliant, let's get rid of all that. We don't need it, let's produce food. It was a case of we had a growing population. Things had to be done. During the Green Revolution, we thought we could make even more food now, so why not go all in, produce as much as we can, nice and cheap, on a massive scale. It just happens that these have been the casualties of that. Yeah, more agricultural land, increase in urban areas, habitat fragmentation. Again, by doing that, we're making these wildflower meadows, these areas, these woodlands further and far between, so they can't travel so freely between them. Pesticide usage, again, during the sort of 60s and 70s became a quite common thing, and over time, it's been a bit of a problem. Yeah, I've got here, moth declines are around 31% over the past 60 years. Fluctuations within decades, of course, though. Yeah, and these are from the UK Centre of Ecology and Hydrology, these maps. So if you want to look those up and see the actual thing, UK Centre of Ecology and Hydrology.
Could I interrupt? It says
Please.
more agricultural land.
Yes, since the 1930s.
Oh, you mean more marginal land has been brought into production?
Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. So there's a lot of this is agriculturally improved grassland, and that's where they've improved it for crop production. Essentially, it's been turned into something that can, provide food for us, as opposed to natural grassland. And this is what's really interesting. And well, I say interesting, it's slightly depressing again. Just bear with me. I mentioned before about what happens in a world with no pollinators. We don't have to look very far for that, because in some parts of the world they don't have pollinators anymore. There's a part of China called Sichuan where they farmed part of it so intensively, they used so much pesticide to deal with their pest problems that they actually killed all of their native bees that lived in the area. So they've had to hand pollinate now. So she's got a stick there with a little brush on it, and she has to sort of wiggle it on that plant to get some pollen, and then wiggle it over there onto that one. And again, when you think about the fact that bees and butterflies have been here for millions of years doing this perfectly, and now this is what we have to do, and that's a huge waste of her time. She's now got to do that all day, every day, and that's the only way they can keep a lot of these plants alive. It's just mad. And the other thing, this is an interesting one. Has anyone seen these before? These are essentially preparing for their bee drones, basically. So they're saying, what happens when the pollinators all die out across the world? Well, it's okay. We'll put millions and millions of pounds, dollars, pounds, whatever, into researching these artificial pollinators that we can use to fly around and fly between plants, move pollen around, and they can do all the pollinating for us. And I kind of want to say, sorry?
They're so pretty, aren't they?
They're quite pretty. Yeah. Well, get rid of all the nice colourful things. Let's have some of these. But my question with this is, if they've got millions and millions of pounds they're putting into researching, building these, and making them as perfect as possible, why don't they put those millions and millions of pounds into looking after the things that we've already got here, that are already doing that job quite well? I mean, and it's a contingency plan, but it is sort of, if the money's there, why are we not? Anyway, I'll get off my high horse now. But it's not all bad news. And like you said, we had a few things said so far. This year could be an interesting one, could be a good one. So far, it's not too bad. It's not all bad news. Only about a month ago, actually it was a couple of months ago, is everyone familiar with the neonicotinoids? There you go, neonicotinoids. They are a seed treatment and a pesticide that's often used in things like oil seeds or sugar beets to combat their pests. And for the past few years, under the Conservatives, it was only allowed under emergency measures. And I think it was the past 7 years or so, it was considered emergency measures, so they used these pesticides every year in sugar beet fields. And they finally properly banned it this year. Of course, that means there's issues for pest control going forwards, but there are methods of pest control, so we could look into other alternatives. I think it's good that we've got rid of some of these things. Neonicotinoids, if anyone's unfamiliar, they're the ones that can confuse bees. They make it very hard for them to forage and find their way back to their nests and things. They cause all sorts of issues for the memories of these animals. This one's really good. So there's a story about a place in Scotland where they've rewilded the area and found that it's gone from, I think they had 35 bees when they started, and now there's over 4,000 that they've got in this area by rewilding it. I can send out the story if anyone's interested. I can send that over because you can circulate it. It's very, very cool.
Do you know the size of the area?
Yes. Again, I was circulating. They are quite a good read. This one's so this is pollen and nectar flower mixes. So these are sustainable farming incentives for farmers. So if you have farmland and you want to provide something for pollinators, bees, wildlife, you can get a little bit of money for doing so, putting aside a bit of your land to provide food for these things. So that's quite good. So even though you've got your large scale production, if farmers want to put aside some land, they can get a little bit of money for it. So it's not wasted. They're not getting it out of production for nothing.
And this is actually working.
This is happening. They're doing quite a lot of it. It's not as taken. You're right, then, Chris. I'm just curious to see what your input is on this.
Well, yeah, it works for some people, but the finances of it aren't quite strong enough, I would say, to encourage a lot of people into it. And some farmers are quite concerned about the pace of the payments and reliability. So we're currently waiting for some money that we're owed on similar type, on some stewardship programs that we entered into like 2 years ago. So the money is so slow to flow through the system that reduces the farmers' incentive to actually take up some of these things. So yeah, and also the problem, some of the stuff was obviously the capital payments have gone in the last few months. So yeah, so a lot of stuff was done really well and it all felt really positive, but then it's all just kind of like got stuck in the treacle and the mire of politics. But yeah, so who's the DEFRA permanent secretary, Janet Hughes, was doing some really, really positive stuff, and the farmers were really in support of what she was doing. But yeah, the politics just sort of pulls it backwards, which is a real shame.
Yeah. So in theory, yes, and in a lot of cases, quite good. But yeah, there's political dirge to deal with as is always. This other one again. Before you ask the question, I don't have all the information. I apologise. 4-year project records 20,000 butterflies thriving in London, which again is a very urbanised area. That's quite nice to know that they are surviving in these places, even if we have changed them significantly from more natural places they would like. I could send out all these stories. They're quite an interesting read. There's lots of stuff going on. From my neck of the woods, back in Rothamsted, and in my science days, this is lots of research that's going on to do with bumblebees, whether it's to do with how pesticides are affecting them, how important they are as foragers, pollinators, their benefits for the ecosystem, etc. There's a lot of research going into them, and I think that's really positive. People out there know that this is important, and they're putting money towards researching and looking forward to it, because we need to have the data. If you go to someone and say, we need to change this, if you have data, say, this is a problem, or this is really good, can we do this? More likely to get some action on that. And this is, well, that is the Rothamsted logo there. So when I used to work at Rothamsted, I used to be part of the insect survey team, and they have these huge, they're like a hoover sticking straight up in the sky. They're about 12 metres high. They suck in insects that are flying around, and that way, they've got, I think there's 12 of them around the country, and they then get sent off to the lab to be identified, and they can then say if you're a farmer in Yorkshire and you're growing cereals, they can say, right, we've just had from our trap in Yorkshire, we've had this species of cereal aphid or pest has just been found. So if you're growing cereal in that area, now's the time to think about spraying. So it's not saying don't spray, it's saying you can target your spray. You can spray at a specific time to catch the thing you want, rather than blanket spraying out of fear all the time and just killing everything. You can reduce it as much as possible, which is good for the farmers because they save money because those sprays aren't cheap and the machines aren't cheap, and it's good for our wildlife because they're not necessarily being hammered all the time by these pesticides. So it's quite good. And these guys are beneficial friends. I think this guy's going to appear. Yeah. Does anyone know what that is? Wasp. Yeah. Parasitoid wasp. So they're very, very cool. I like them a lot. A lot of my work at Rothamsted used to be on these, looking at how they can control pests. They essentially, much like the film Alien, they lay their egg inside the caterpillar, the aphid, whatever it is, and it eats the inside of that insect, pops out again, pupates underneath it, and emerges as a fresh adult wasp ready to go and do it again. They're excellent. They eat wildflowers and nectar. Pollinators, again, very useful. Not amazing pollinators because they're really small. A lot of them are not super fairy again compared to a bumblebee, but they're doing a good job. And I think the theory with a lot of it is that if we can learn a bit more about where they are, what they're doing, when they're active, we can provide for them and bring them onto our farms, so we won't need to spray so much because we can have a ground force that are fighting them for us. I think they're fantastic. This one is probably going to be about maybe 2 centimetres maximum. These ones, the bigger one.
garden ones, and I wonder what it was.
Because there are some that are quite big and stripy and yellow. They look a bit different from our sort of classic eusocial wasps, the sort of black and yellow stripy ones. But some of them are really, really tiny. The way you wouldn't even see them with the naked eye. Really fascinating though, because you've got probably parasitoids that are laying their eggs inside the pest species, their host species, and then there's super parasitoids that are they're looking for the worm, the insect that has been infected with the egg of that wasp, but wants to lay its egg inside the wasp that's inside that insect. And I think there's also hyperparasitoids, unless I'm wrong, that are looking for the wasp that has laid its egg inside the wasp that is inside the caterpillar. It's a mad, mad world, these parasitoids. It's really fascinating. The truth is just that we don't know enough about them to be able to really provide for them, but the hope is that by providing space for them and the right food that they like, we can bring them onto our farms and they can do a lot of the pest control for us. And how can we help? So we're on a sort of smaller scale, because I'm talking a lot about big scale farming here, but on a smaller scale, what can we do to help? You can support farmers who use fewer pesticides. Again, if you know a bit about your regen, I know Wild Farms now, they farm to organic practices, and you can buy their bread that is grown organically, not using pesticides, so you can support the right people if you're really particularly interested. That's great. Providing wildflowers and spaces for wildlife to flourish. Again, ideally native, so you're going to find some wildflower things to come and feed. Keep it native if you can. But some non-native things are very good for providing food. It's again, the balance. Hedgerows, corridors, methods for insects to travel between habitats. We talked about it. It's becoming more common today. There's a lot more research going into it. But again, if you can, diversifying land where we're able. We've talked about this on the farms. Providing new things, especially on Farm Ed. Like I said, we've got different habitat types around the place. Do come and check them out, they're really cool. Solitary bees, providing bee hotels and nesting space. I do have a little picture of a bee hotel, but I'm sure everyone's seen it. It's like a wooden box, lots of little holes in it for them to hide inside and to lay put their young and things inside. And the final one, just a very small note. If you have a bumblebee that looks like it's tired and you want to perk it up, don't feed it honey unless you're 100% sure where that honey's come from. Because sometimes the way that they mix it, the way they look after it, what it's been sort of taken from, can be poisonous to our bumblebees. So if you know exactly where it's come from, you're probably all right. But if you're not sure, just a bit of sugar and water on a spoon will be fine.
Can I ask a question?
You can.
I had a bee on my garden path last year, and I didn't know about the sugar bit, so I just put some a saucer with some water in and just lifted it up and put it on there. And it went. Does that mean it flew off, or does that mean I killed it?
No, it's probably fine. If it's a bit watery, it probably just means it's just looking for somewhere to cool down. Because you imagine these, I assume everyone's heard the statistic, it's like a bumblebee has to beat its wings however many 100 times a second in order to fly. And so the heat they're generating is massive for such a tiny thing. So they get tired easily, especially on a hot day. So providing a little bit of shade.
Quite hot, yeah.
Exactly,
so,
a little bit of water.
Yeah,
I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's all right then. Because since I heard about the sugar bit and water, I've been panicking that I killed that poor
No,
bumblebee.
sugar's mostly okay. I think I wouldn't worry too much about sugar. It's honey because of the way that it's processed and stuff. So sugar, water, probably fine. If you're in doubt, just water, but probably all right.
Okay.
There was supposed to be a picture here again. I'll just do this off the cuff. Does anyone here do No Mow May? Couple of people. No one got a lawn, fair enough. So this might be a controversial take. I don't really agree with No Mow May because I think there you go, No Mow Ma. Because and again, there is proof that it does provide a little bit of habitat for your insects and things. It does help build the populations a little bit. But I can't help but feel that if you provide space for them to be for a month and then they build up their populations, they think, lovely, we've got a lovely home, and then you chop that all down.
Well, I do No Mow from the end of April till August.
I think of that. Well, that's different. If you're doing it a bit more
Everybody else thinks,
consistently.
what a mess.
Yeah, I mean, you should see my garden.
It's No Mow May, Let It Bloom June, and I don't know if there's a rhyme for July, but...
Supply July. Bees, I don't know. Pollen supply
Nectar
July.
supply
Yeah,
July.
there you go. But yeah,
Supply July.
I mean, I mean, again, this is just my opinion. I mean, and there is data to suggest that it does work, it does help, but I can't help but feel that if you had space to do this in the first place, just provide a little bit that goes sort of more long term, that they can just come in and out of, more consistent for your population build up, means they're not going to lose their home. If you want to have good wildflowers and stuff, you do have to mow it every now and then, otherwise you just get the dominant things will just crowd out everything else. But giving them a bit of space that's more consistent, I think, is, I personally would say, is more important. And just to sort of wrap it up, I suppose, how can you get involved? I mean, we've already had a couple of people who said they do their butterfly counts and things. But yeah, get involved with the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, doing the bee walk surveys. That's where you do a transect through a field or your garden or wherever you want, just to count the different types of bees you see. It's really good to report back on the data so they get an idea of what's going on around the country. Butterflies, we've mentioned that as well. Stand in one place, count them all, send them in. Brilliant. It's just a way of you can help out. You can find the data so we can know what's going on and where with which species, and we can start to think more about what we can do. We can't do a lot of this stuff to help them if we don't know what's going on. So it's really important. And I think that is that.
Thank you very much. That was very, very interesting, and I'm sure people were bursting with questions, but I'll say because of the coldness, maybe we'll finish at 1:45 instead of on the hour. And if you want to stay on and ask questions, maybe you can, but we won't hold you to staying until 9 o'clock. So I'll keep you to short questions, please, to make sure that we get as many questions as possible. So fire away. Who would like to ask a question? Okay.
Yeah.
So the idea of spraying only what's required when it's required and stuff like that, is there enough spraying machines in the country to do it when it's required? So it sounds like you're compressing that kind of spraying into a very short period of time.
That's a good question, and it kind of, I suppose it sort of falls on the individual farmer for that one. So if the farmer's got the equipment and they're going to spray anyway, they've got the equipment ready to go, they're just providing them with more information on when they can target that specifically. On a sort of countrywide scale, you're right, yeah, that would take a lot of equipment, and a lot of farmers and landowners will share big machines, do a lot of spraying.
It got rented, didn't it?
Yeah, quite a lot. Yeah, exactly. We'll do a lot of that.
Can you not do it with drones, which are smaller and lighter?
Again, there's a lot of research going into whether you can use drones for spraying, because you can even use drones to look at out in your field where things are going on. So you can look for disease in certain plants or pest populations and things. So potentially, yes.
I was listening to something on the farming programme a bit back when they got a little thing, they called it a robot dog, but it's got no head, it was a bit spooky. And it will actually go along and identify, I think it was 500,000 plants, not to take the pests out, but to take the weeds out.
It's an interesting idea, because a lot of farmer time is spent walking through fields looking at leaf blight or whatever, the diseases on your plants, or looking for pests, because a lot of pests that you have to count how many there are on your plants in order to know you've got an infestation, because you've got to find a certain number before you think, okay, now I need to spray, that's the spray threshold, or something like that. So if you can reduce the amount of time farmers have to spend doing that, maybe that's useful as well.
More questions?
And this thing, of course, didn't compact the soil.
Yeah, that's true as well.
I've got a comment, and that is, you said that Farm Aid is 100 acres. Well, that is exactly the same size as our old golf course.
Oh yeah.
Now, that's very interesting.
That's why I asked the size, because if we know the size
Yes,
of the golf course area compared to the one that you said at the start,
And the Scottish side, yeah.
and how many bees were, increasing. If we knew the size difference, we could take that to the council.
well, the size difference is about 4%.
Yeah.
I think ours is 104 acres or something like that, and this and yours is 100 acres.
107, I think.
107.
Yeah.
So actually the same size basically. So we could do what you're doing
Yeah.
with the golf course. Maybe we ought to say things like that, or what ideas could we translate? I mean, are there any more questions?
Have you got flowers?
Sorry?
Do you study inside of motorways?
Yes, studying the side of motorways. They do lots to do with hedgerows and motorways, because that's where there's a lot of late effects from things coming out of hedgerows that are living there. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know if Chris. I'm sorry, Chris. I don't mean to keep calling on you, but if you've heard anything of any of that.
No. All I know is there's some fantastic examples of new roads that have been built where they've done really beneficial stuff. So the bypass down in Weymouth is like a fantastic nature, isn't it? They're covered in small blues, where they've been mindful of how they've replanted after the big project. But I don't think about old motorway, but that is something like,
Yeah, I think there is research out there. I couldn't quote it off the top of my head, but yes, there's definitely a lot of research going into how all these different landscape changes have affected populations. Definitely, or for good or bad.
This is a general question to the whole room, please. Apart from my bluebells, what things can I put in my garden to attract bees and butterflies, like flowers and things?
Is that someone say roses over there? I think I'm going to be quite diplomatic in my answer and say variety is the spice of life. I think a good variety of things is probably good for. In a lot of cases, it's good to mow a bit of your grass and see what grows back. I think there's certain plants.
I've only got a little tiny lawn anyway. It's just like I just want to put pots and containers and things around my garden.
I've got advice for you. Go to a garden centre and see, like, maybe not at a very busy time, and see what kind of bees and butterflies are on certain plants.
Oh, okay.
And buy them.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have a little thing on the label.
Yeah.
Oh, do they?
Pollinators. They
Oh,
have like a
okay.
bee symbol or
Actually, Henry's garden centre has a section
Yeah.
as well that says
Yeah.
for the bees.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
buy something from there.
There's a
Yeah,
site called Rose's Bees, I think, and she has a whole selection of plants which are good for bees. And I've just got hold of an old book called How to Start a Butterfly Garden.
Oh, okay.
Also been looking at a site.
Yeah, because I'm greedy. I quite like bees and butterflies in my garden.
There's an obvious butterfly bush if you've got enough space to grow one. You can keep trimming them down. You just keep trimming them to the ground and they'll still come back.
Buglias.
And especially,
Buglias, yes,
especially
yeah.
the deep purple ones are really good for butterflies.
I've got some orange butterfly, not with globosa, but it's a Weyeriana, I think. And that flowers late. That's very popular.
Yeah, because different species will be foraging at different times throughout the year, so have a good variety of things that are coming earlier, mid-season, later.
That
Really
really
good.
comes up.
I don't know if you've heard this. I heard that actually cities and suburbia are actually very good for because people plant their gardens with just a random variety of things, largely flowers. And apparently that's quite good, I heard. I don't know if you...
I mean, it's better than the alternative, I suppose, isn't it, of having nothing going on? Yeah, I think they are quite good, because if people are planting these things that aren't necessarily ornamental, but are wildflowers, yeah.
I think it's aiming to have something in flower for as many months of the year as you can. And I know where they used to do the bee research at Stanton, they used to grow a lot of shrubby honeysuckle because that flowers really early in the year. And something like January, February time. So if there is anything out there, there's something wrong to it.
I've got an evergreen honeysuckle which doesn't mind sunshine, thick leathery leaves. I don't know what it is, there's no fragrance to it that I can detect, but that has a very long flowering period.
I've got a bush down the middle between me and my neighbour, and apparently it's a winter flowering jasmine. It's got green leaves on it in the summer, and then in the winter, at the end of the summer, all the leaves grow and this massive yellow flowers come out on it.
Oh yes, Jasmine nudiflorum.
Yeah, I don't know. I just know it's very pretty in the winter.
Oh yes, it's lovely.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
Sorry, you've not mentioned the benefits of trees to many of these pollinators. And I was looking at some of the photographs early on of Barnet. Your hedgerows seem, well, from the photos that I can see from here, and I don't have the right glasses on, but I can see very, very few large immature trees in any of the hedgerows.
Yes, so a lot of Farm Ed, let's see if I can find a nice picture. So Farm Ed was a, so we were just by the Witchwoods, which used to be a huge woodland, and so a lot of the trees have been removed from the area because of the agricultural land that was taken up. So we have planted a lot of trees that we're hoping to keep going and carry on, lots of willows and things like that. But admittedly, yes, we're still working on that. We've only been open since 2021, so and been in progress for about 10 years. So it's a work in progress. Yes, admittedly, I focus mainly on the more traditional agricultural land in terms of this talk. But yeah.
So we have a butterfly in this area, the brown hair streak butterfly, that congregates around large mature trees and hedgerows, and with ash dieback and with elm disease, we're losing so many of these. It's such an easy way to put trees back into the landscape is to plant trees into hedgerows.
Absolutely, yeah. It's true. And they're really good as well. A lot of different types of trees are good on an agricultural land, because not only will you get, again, your SFI, your farming incentives for doing so, but you also, potentially, I know this is not what the answer what you're looking for, but if you have these trees growing up, you can potentially coppice them to then use them as fertiliser again, so you don't have to use your chemical fertilisers. It's all options.
And use them again. It's,
Yeah, exactly.
retain
Yeah.
things like this. It's,
Yeah.
Last question?
Why can't we go back to how things were? A long time ago, when we didn't seem to have the problems we have now.
You
I
better
mean,
answer this one.
That could be an endless conversation, couldn't it really? I think, so from a lot of my work in regen agriculture, regenerative stuff, the answer seems to be we are looking at what we used to do. Because there are books from the sort of, what's his name? George Henderson wrote a book called The Farming Ladder in 1944, I think it came out. And looking back at that now, a lot of the things we're aiming towards in regen agriculture were things that they were practicing at the time, in the 40s, that people might have gone, well, you're a bit weird for doing that, that's a bit strange, why are you doing that? But they're all things that we've looked back on, actually, he was onto something, he had a good idea. And I think, yeah, a lot of the ways that farming was done in the past is things we need to start looking back on, because it's sort of worked, and if we can move away from this very, I think it has a place. I think this very intensified agriculture with lots of chemicals, we do need to feed the population ultimately.
We
It has a
can't feed
place.
our own population, I thought. We've got to keep importing food.
Well, there is that as well, yeah,
But,
that's
you
true.
know, or else we're all eating too much because we're all overweight. Or not all of us, but most of us.
That's not really the case though, is it? Because you keep hearing
About waste.
Well,
there
Yeah.
are huge
I'll bring
poultry farms.
bring things to a close. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank
And
you.
that's very interesting. I must give a real plug for FarmEd, because I went there and I discovered a lot, and you must go. And the reason, if nothing else, there's a lovely coffee shop there. Okay, people, I can see
Yes.
people nodding. There is a really good coffee shop. So if you're passing Chipping Norton, is it?
Yes, yep.
Chipping Norton, do divert and go and look in. So
Can you come in any day of the week?
We are open Monday to Friday, 9 to 4.
Yeah.
Cafe.
Oh, okay.
You're welcome to come in and just check out the cafe if you want. All of our food is, well, most of our food is either grown on site in our kitchen garden or using our wheats and things like that. We try and keep it as local as possible. Mhm.